and request Joe Longfellow to come forward and open the meeting with our national anthem. Mr. Longfellow.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy son's command. Car ton bras se porte l'épée, il se porte la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. All Canada, we stand on guard for thee. All Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joe, very much once again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My pleasure, once again.
Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
I would entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Main. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest tonight? There being none, I request that be so noted. I'd also at this time entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole 17-16 held on September 12th, 2016. Moved by Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Carried. Move to determination of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Main.
Number 4, please, and number 1.
Number 1 and number 4. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 1 and item 4, please.
Item 1. And what was the second one, Madam Mayor? Item 4 again. Anyone else? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Item 2 for the delegation.
Thank you for that. Item. Any other items? We're good? Okay, got to call for a motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion. Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Main. All those in favor? Carried. We have a presentation this evening from Gilles Croteau, our Community Health Services Coordinator for the city, introducing Dr. Kelly Markle. And Jill, if you could just press the red button there, that will turn on your speaker. Welcome, Dr. Markle.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome the newest member of the Port Colborne Family Health Organization and recent graduate of the McMaster Family Medicine Program, Dr. Kelly Markle. So Dr. Markle will be starting to see patients this month and will to continue to take applications from the patient list that we keep at City Hall. We are extremely pleased with Dr. Markle's decision to join our medical community and wish her all the success as she starts her new career in Port Colborne. I'd like to invite Dr. Markle to say a few words to the council.
Hello, thank you everyone for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. I grew up in Cooks Mills, so I know the area quite well. I went to university at McMaster and did my undergraduate degree in health sciences there. From there, I went to the University of British Columbia and did my medical degree there and lived in Victoria for about 5 years. Then I moved back to Ontario and did my residency in family medicine at McMaster University. I was fortunate enough to do my last year of residency in the Niagara region. During my last year, I spent a few months working alongside Dr. Derek Rivers in Port Colborne, and I absolutely fell in love with the city of Port Colborne while I was there. And when I graduated from the family medicine residency program, Amanda Bell contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in joining her group in Port Colborne. So it really was a no-brainer for me. I joined, jumped at the opportunity, and I'm really excited to be a part of the medical community here. I look forward to working in Port Colborne for many years to come, and I also have a husband and a young son named Zach, and so we're really excited to be here and setting down some roots. So thank you, everyone, for allowing me the opportunity, and I really look forward to working here.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We're excited to have you here as well. I wonder if any member of council has any questions, whether you would entertain their questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
Councillor Doucette.
I don't have a question, but a comment. When we were in the back, I welcomed you, but I wasn't aware that that was your husband. I just thought maybe it was just a friend. So I welcome the family.
Thank
now
you.
that I know there's even a little one involved,
There's
that's even
little.
better.
Yeah.
Okay? So, welcome, please. I mean, if there's anything that we can do as a group, and you may even see me, that I'm part of that particular full, so I see a doctor there as well. So I was there this morning, matter of fact. So, you know, welcome to Port Colborne, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this place, and it'll be perfect for your family. It's fantastic. I've been here for 45 years, and I wouldn't give it up.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any member of council? There being none, we won't put you on the spot any longer.
Thank you.
Again, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. At this point, we have delegations. There's a 10-minute maximum, and our first one this evening is Jim and Sherry Cousineau from the Clink on Elm. Dr. Cousineau, could you come forward? And the light is still on, so we're good.
I'm good.
You're good.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Sherry's going to stay there. I'm going to do the talking tonight. It's been a long time since we've been here. It's been 3 years, I think, almost 4 years when we bought that property on Elm Street. And you guys were gracious enough to get us through that build. We're building again. I know that some of you got the emails and we're on that email list. We're building again. We're going to expand the warehouse. We've been in negotiations and in contact with the city for just over a year. And what we're requesting is that we disregard the site plan control because we're at the 11th hour. Well, there's multiple reasons. What we're asking for is to discontinue site plan control. We meet all the requirements for zoning. I think you guys have the email package with our property. Really, that's what I have to say. I look forward to your questions because then we can make things really clear this way. Any questions for me?
Any questions from members of council? Thank you. Mr. Cousineau. Any questions? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cousineau, site plan is for the outside area. At least I was under the impression site plan was for that, unless I'm making a wrong assessment or a wrongful decision here. Is your plan going to change anything on the outside of this building?
Okay. Actually, if I can correct you, site plan is not just for outside, as we've learned in recent weeks. Site plan is for any change of use to the property. So, to be totally correct, we could fall under site plan. We are not planning any change to the exterior of the property from what you see there. We were under the, we were instructed by second floor that we didn't need site plan over the course of the year on multiple occasions. We've met 4 times with the city. And then once we submit our permit application, or our drawings for permit application, that's when all this stuff kind of came up. Or that's when all this stuff did come up. So to answer your question, we're not changing the outside of the building.
Councilor Dan.
So, Jimmy, you want to be exempt from site plan and the charges of the site plan, which I believe is about $3,000.
Yes.
And I guess you feel that you were misfed information from the second floor and that you were under the impression that you didn't need it because you weren't making any exterior changes and...
Just like Councilor Doucette.
Okay, because I know we've had a couple conversations and, you know, like...
I think it goes beyond, I don't want to say misled. I want to say that we were instructed by certain people on the second floor. Not everybody is still on the second floor. So we were told we didn't need it. I don't think we were misled. I think maybe there's some miscommunication or lack of knowledge on their part. So we budgeted for our build certain costs and certain timelines. So we're trying to get this build done over the winter time so we can save 10 to 15% on our labor costs. Everybody wants to do a clean build inside in a warm spot in the winter, right? If we have to go this way, this can drive us back a few months, and then we're building in the spring, summer where we're going to pay peak rates. So we've signed an agreement with a firm. It's rented, and we signed the agreement based on what our expenses were, what we budget for expense. So now we run the potential of being askew. Not good for a healthcare firm, not good for our firm.
Any other questions? Councilor Kenny.
Not really a question, Your Worship, but just to say that I'm very supportive of us waiving this fee. I think we need to do that tonight. And I believe that the information we've been giving, both in emails and the paperwork you have in front of you, show there's ample room for parking. And they're anxious to get this moving, and I'm anxious for them to get it going. So I would make a motion if anyone has any other questions. I guess we have to have a leave, which I'll ask for that. But I'll let Councillor Desmarais ask any questions.
Councilor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my question is actually for Dan Ecolina. I would like to hear what city staff have to say about this. At this point, I am fully in support of it, but I would just like to hear from city staff.
Mr. Ecolina, do you have a comment?
Through Mr. Maloney, Mayor Maloney, to your worship, to Councillor Desmarais, my only comment is the bylaw is under council's purview. If the council does not want this application or property to be under site plan control, then I would just look for direction of council.
Any further questions at this time? Mr. Bonder, you're very pensive.
Come on, Ron.
Yeah, I'm going to support this for the reason that there is some ambiguity here as to whether, well, maybe there isn't on Jim's part that, that nothing was talked about site plan control until kind of the 11th hour, and things are more than settled as far as, rents charged and wanting to get at this. But I'd feel remiss if I didn't say how important site plan control is. Certainly in Ward 4, we've run into this in a number of occasions that, site plan control is as much for the neighbors as it is for anybody. And the fact that, I've all the confidence that that Jim will do what he said he's going to do. That being said, site plan control shouldn't be taken lightly as far as getting rid of it. I mean, it's really, really important. I'll just ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ecolina. If in the future this venture goes well and there's an ask to put an addition on some part of this build, would then that have another chance to put site plan control on this property?
Direct line.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bodnar, the site plan right now under the bylaw that we have is the interior renovations trigger site plan control. There is no exterior plans for additions. However, if in the future a building does come up, the bylaw also then requires, there is an exemption to the bylaw if it's less than 25% of an increase of the floor area, that can also be exempt, provided there's no other concerns with respect to drainage or any sort of matter that doesn't cause problems, and it can be exempt.
Okay, fair enough. I'm okay with that, thanks.
Any further questions? Now I think would be the appropriate time to request leave of council to deal, to waive the requirements of notice for this application.
Yes, so I will ask for a leave of council to bring that up, so I'll make a motion for leave of council first.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Demery?
Thank you.
Vote. All in favor? Carried.
And now, Mr. Mayor, that the council waive the site plan agreement on this particular property for this time only. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Mr. Danch? All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you, Mr. Kuzno.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, sir.
Please? Thank you for that. And I want to say that we do meet all of the standards for our location, but the last few weeks have been somewhat tense, but they're getting much better. We're working with the second floor, and having everyone back on staff is good for us because we're familiar with some people. So we look forward to moving forward and having a great relationship with the second floor planning department. Thank you.
Okay, we have that's okay. We have a second delegation this evening that's dealing with item number 2 on the agenda, which has been pulled by Mr. Doucette. I think it'd be preferable to wait until that item is called for the second delegation to come forward because of the connection. Moving on then to my report. I'd like to start out by recognizing again Mr. Peter Siness, who's to my right here. Mr. Siness is the Director of Community and Corporate Services here at the City of Port Colborne, and he has been recognized by the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks and Treasurers in Ontario for being a member for the past 20 years. This is a long-standing commitment to this organization, which plays an important role in municipal government as they help us set standards for municipal professionals. Peter, I understand you have received a certificate from this organization, and we are proud of your continued participation, not only in the organization, but here in Port Colborne. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Just a brief comment on flavors. I'd like to send out a special thank you to our staff and volunteers who stood by the wrath of Mother Nature last weekend to bring us a wonderful new experience with our Flavors Festival located at the Roselawn Center. Friday night saw many residents and visitors out to enjoy the great food, drink, and music. Saturday was a little touchy with rain falling off and on throughout most of the day, but having the ability to move everything into the Roselawn Center proved that this is the right venue, and it was a great event, and we hope that will continue. Valet Day on Saturday, Valet held their annual open house at the Valet Health and Wellness Center. As a proud corporate sponsor, Valet has offered a full range of free activities to the whole family. I understand it was very well attended. Fire Prevention Week. On Saturday, October 8th, the fire department will be hosting an open house to kick off Fire Prevention Week. You are encouraged to stop by the fire hall between 10 and 2 for activities for the whole family. Medical marijuana grow operation. I cannot let the meeting go by without commenting on this. The community was very concerned about the break and enter at the medical marijuana grow operation on Pinecrest Road and the apprehension of 5 suspects. Our compliments to all involved. The police agencies were very prompt in their quick response and apprehension of 5 suspects, and continued search for possibility of additional suspects. We thank them for that. That's no question about that. Their subsequent investigation, preliminary investigation, has disclosed some interesting facts as outlined by the police. The operation had a license for 400 plants. In fact, they seized 3,400 plants, which certainly violates their license. And we're continuing, what I would say, we will watch Health Canada and encourage them, because of these violations, that perhaps their license should be revoked and that no longer growing of marijuana in this operation be allowed. That's not our decision. It's not the police's decision. It's Health Canada's decision, but we will certainly lobby Health Canada until there is a satisfactory resolution. Finally, just received a media release regarding the Ted Kennedy banner, which used to hang in, or does hang in Maple Leaf Gardens, and then subsequently at the Air Canada Centre, is to be returned to Port Colborne as part of Toronto Maple Leafs Centennial Season Banner Tour. It will be arriving in port on Wednesday, September 28th at 7 p.m. at the Valet Health and Wellness Centre. Mr. Mark Kennedy, the son of Ted Kennedy, Peter Kennedy, will be there along with myself to accept it, and there will be a public celebration of as the Toronto Maple Leafs deliver this banner to ourselves, and it will be hung in an appropriate section of the new Valet Centre for time immemorial. And we thank the Maple Leaf organization for this great honor to our community. There are many banners being retired to communities throughout Ontario, and we're favored to have one of our own honored back in the hometown where he had his early hockey days and where he grew up. That is the end of my report. The regional councillor has advised that he would not be with us tonight, and then we'll perhaps now move on to councillor's items, and I'd like to do with item number 2, which I mentioned earlier. There was a delegation on item number 2. Mr. Doucette, could you put the recommendation on the floor? Will do, sir.
Planning and Development Report number 2016-155, Subject Recommendation Report, Amendment to Development Charge Bylaw 6131-97-14, 1-year waiving of charges for residential and non-residential development.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. I should perhaps deal with consideration of councilors' items first before we go into the items requiring separate discussion. Are there any councillors who have something they wish to discuss? Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Kenny, and Councillor Bonder, Councillor Danch. Councillor Kenny first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I was sitting in your chair, I had a request from some residents at 3 and 400 Steele for a sign for Seniors Crossing, and that promptly went up. Several weeks later, I had a request from that same group for us to put a flashing amber light over those signs. I sent an email off to Chris Lee, and I have not heard back yet. And again, when I went over to the Legion on Saturday, a couple of people were there and asked me, when are the amber lights over those signs going up to indicate a slowdown area, if anything. So through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Hansen. Mr. Hansen, can you tell me when that is going to happen?
Mr. Hansen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kenny. I'll follow up on that tomorrow, Councillor Kenny. I'm not certain whether that was an order that had to go in for the lights. I'm not sure what the inventory looks like for additional lighting. I know we've ordered some additional lights for some new stop signs that are going up, so I'll follow up on that and get a reply back to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Councillor Doucette? Another one?
Just one more.
Okay, Councillor.
Thank you. Also, on Saturday when I represented you at the Legion, I had an opportunity to speak to our MP, Vance Badaway, who tells me that he has brought this incident that we had to the Health Canada's minister, and he is working on doing just what you suggested, that their license be revoked because they did not follow protocol. And I believe, Councillor Demarais, we're talking earlier, I don't think they have a license, Your Worship. I think what they have is there are people who have plants there that have a prescription for so many plants, and they're supposed to be the overseer of that. But as we found out via the media, that they were way over what they were supposed to have. So I just wanted to point out that I speak to him at that event, and he is doing his part like we are doing as much as we can from our end. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Demarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 4 items that are requiring attention tonight. And I'll start, if I can, through you to Mr. Hanson. Ron, could you give me an update on what's happening with the crosswalk for Main Street East in Wellington?
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Demarais. The region is preparing the design for that. The design is complete. It was to be done in August. And then we were looking for an install after the August design was complete. They haven't given us a firm date. The project is in their queue for signals that are being installed throughout the region. So we'll do one more follow-up with the region and try to get a firmer date on that. We don't have it as yet.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, and my next item would be for Dan Ecolina. Dan, we've already spoken to these to some of these issues over the phone, but I would like to have some follow-up on the situation with the squatters that are along Welland Street. We've been chasing them all summer long. They've been on private property, on public property. They've been, living off the grid for the whole summer. Neighbors are now phoning the police and phoning bylaw and getting no satisfaction on either side. Someone needs to take responsibility for it, and I'm hoping you would have an answer after our conversation this weekend.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Demarais, the police are meeting on site tomorrow with bylaw enforcement to have them removed from Welland Street. The St. Lawrence Seaway is aware as well, and they're taking proactive measures to secure their assets. So we'll have them removed, but it's not to say that they may appear somewhere else.
I thank you very much, because that will at least take care of the situation from this part. Very soon the cold weather will be here, and they'll disappear into doing some couch surfing, I would imagine, for the winter. But this is an issue that we're going to be facing again next year as we did last year, so maybe we can get on it earlier and move on this really tough, not just letting them just move along, but get them removed into a shelter and move along that way. The next item is, again, Mr. Ecolina, it's about transport truck parking in residential areas, both on the streets and on city property. These trucks are, large trucks that require a warm-up in some cases. There's one that warms up over half an hour every morning at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. If that's outside your bedroom window, it's going to be disruptive. There's just no doubt about that. And it's been happening again. Bylaw, with the hours that they work, have not been able to catch it. I personally sent pictures in with date stamps, but apparently that's not enough. They have to witness it themselves, or they can't go forward with it. Police have been called and have refused to do anything with it. They say it's the city's problem. So again, I'm asking you to come up with a solution, because right now the residents are suffering from it.
Mr. Aguilar.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demarais, I can advise that the transport truck has been ticketed, and we will be following up, if we haven't already, with the property owner as well as the tenant.
That's very good news again. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. That's wonderful. Yeah, one more. This one, this is a new one. I have sent a message along to the police. But again, this is going to be for Mr. Aquilina, and we have spoken a little bit about this. This is about drones, and we have an issue with drones being used with a camera, flying over properties, and those properties shortly afterwards are robbed of items that were laying outside in view. So it's not just a case of your privacy being invaded, but now they're being used for an extra criminal purpose, and that's for the purposes of theft. We don't have a bylaw. That is my understanding. There is no bylaw for this. From my understanding, the police really can't do anything about this until after a crime has occurred, and there can be a linkage proven. But I'm thinking that we may need a bylaw dealing with drones and their use in residential areas, and I would hope, Mr. Aquilina, you could speak to that.
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais, I did some research, and these are regulated by Transport Canada. They regulate the air.
Okay.
They do have some rules with respect to drones, but they're more interested in the protection of the aviation industry. Yeah. So there are guidelines in place that regulate how far away you can be from certain locations. They do have the guidelines that even talk about the smaller drones, which they have. They actually fall under the Aviations and Aeronautics Act. But they do talk about respecting the privacy of the individuals, be so many meters away from people, so many meters away from buildings. They're actually proposing new regulations to deal with these, so they're not yet in place yet. They proposed these back in 2015, so they're still working on possible regulations. But they do say that they acknowledge that if there are privacy issues under the Canadian Privacy Act, that the police would be the ones to deal with trespassing as well. Even on the Ontario Trespass Act would be the one thing that the law enforcement would be able to use if people are actually trespassing, being charged with potential voyeurism, things of that nature. So they don't have any regulations yet that are that specific. I looked, I could not find one municipality that actually has a bylaw specifically with drones across Canada. We do, however, have a bylaw in our parks bylaw that prohibit them within parks, municipal parks. There's a couple other municipalities that have the same regulation, but not a bylaw across the entire municipality regulating it, specifically for municipal parks. So at this time, Councillor Desmarais, that's all I have to report. I can follow up for further information, but that's all the information that I was able to find.
Well, that's quite a bit more than the last time we were speaking, so I thank you for that. I really would suggest, though, that we look at putting a bylaw in place, because drones are becoming far more affordable, and I must admit they are fun. I wouldn't mind having one just to play with, but the thing is, these are not being used to play with. This is about criminal activity. So I would suggest that we take a look at putting a bylaw in place that would regulate their use in our community. Waiting for other agencies, that doesn't cut it for me. I think we should step on it. Thank you.
Are you finished, Councillor Desmarais? Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Desmarais that perhaps we can get a list of those requirements that you would referenced, and that so for all members of council, as well as we'd like to draft a letter to the Minister of Transportation, and as well as our MP, expressing our concerns that regulations aren't in place yet, and encourage them to follow through as quickly as possible because of the situations that we could be faced with and are faced with from time to time. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Bodner, you had a comment. Yeah. Councillor Dash, do you want to go first?
Sure, pick on me.
Councillor Bodner is being very gracious in giving you the first word.
Through you to Mr. Hanson, please. I'd asked about some dog watching over at the markets and stuff like that. I sent a couple notes to bylaw. I haven't got any, serious answers back. I did get one phone call. I know the season's, it's the fall and Port Colborne's market's a wonderful thing, but I get reports from my wife on a weekly basis, and I guess a nice German Shepherd with a nice tight leash on him being held back by his owner going through the market isn't exactly attractive. So not so much for me, but for my wife, I think maybe if we could have one of those bylaw guys walk across the street there and have a peek.
If I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Danch, it's actually the Welland Humane Society that regulates the dogs in that area. They're aware that there are certain dogs that are roaming. They need to be there because they have the authority to deal with it ASAP under their authority. So they're the ones that need to be aware and need to be regulated. So we can follow up again to advise of the seriousness that we would like them on site.
Thank you, because I heard that about 4 weeks ago, and I did talk with bylaw, and they were saying, you know, that they're the ones that had to do the not bylaw per se, but the animal people were the ones that would write the ticket. So just a little. And we only have, I guess, we have one sign over there that mentions no dogs in the market. Maybe we can buy two. And if. Yeah, and I guess the bylaw issue was Dan's, obviously, but for Ron there, Charlotte Street there, if you're heading east up there, it's quite the bump. I just wonder if we could have someone have a look there right around the Jones office there, Boyer's accounting office. It's there's quite an indifference in the asphalt there. If we could have a little peek at that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Danch. Excuse me. We'll have a look at that tomorrow. We have our patching contractor in town, so we'll take a look at that and see if there's anything we can do to improve the situation.
Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so I'm clear about Councillor Danch's ask, is the Welland Humane Society going to be at the market on Friday morning? Was that an ask?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bonner, we tell them that there are dogs on the grounds at the market. We tell them every week. Whether they're showing up or not, we don't have the control to walk them down to regulate. But we will let them know again that the market is coming up on Friday, give them advance notice to have their staff out there.
Okay. So you might just remind them that we pay them to do the job. So this isn't an ask, it's a tell, I think. So just, I think that's the way to do it. Mr. Mayor, you touched briefly on the armed robbery at the, I don't even want to call it medical marijuana operation, but it's a, you know, it's certainly a greenhouse that where people with prescriptions were able to grow it. And I don't want to confuse the two, the new operations that are proposed, like the one in Sharks, and then these that are grandfathered in, entirely different animal. But I don't want to just gloss over it and mention it. This was a traumatic event. There's people in the audience here that, you know, this is a big deal. You know, my friends and neighbors out there that had 6 armed police officers running across their deck very early in the morning, you know, it looked like a movie set if it wasn't happening right on your property. It was pretty damn scary for a lot of people. And we have to do more than just sit here and ask who's looking after this. I don't believe for a minute that Health Canada has anything to say about this. It appears that the police only act on investigations that they might do, which they haven't done for I don't know how many years, 3 years it's been there. It appears we're handicapped as far as, you know, what we can do. But I'd ask council if they would support me in asking for a staff report, if staff could relook at this. And I want the fire chief involved too, and I know that everybody's limited to what they can do, but this is a time when this is front and center, it's highlighted. I understand from neighbors and from rumors it looks like the place has been cleaned out. It's dark. It doesn't look like anything's growing there now. But in that report, I want to know, can it reopen? Obviously, there's still a police investigation going on. Police aren't sharing anything that I know of with us, nor should they, to compromise the investigation. But when they finally come to the end of that investigation, I want our staff to find out, or the mayor's office to find out, what the heck is, really the results of it, and going forward, what's going to happen? We can't just say, whoops, oh, gee, that's too bad. Now it starts all over again. We don't want this in our community. This people with guns robbing this place. It's just totally not acceptable. So I wonder if council would support me in asking for a staff report on this, realizing that it could take some time because it'll depend on when the police, finish their investigation. But we need to know if we have any control over this. And I will actually be bringing a notice of motion forward, and I'll explain that at the time for the next meeting. And there's people in the crowd here that went through this, and I know Carrie Fallon out there has come to be kind of a spokesman for a number of the neighbors out there. I wonder if council would grant a few minutes, from somebody that, I was there, I wasn't right beside there, but certainly the police staged at the end of my lot because they thought they had somebody trapped between our house and Vimy Road. And when you look out there and you see 8 heavily armed police officers with dogs, it's not a nice sight. It's not something we want to see in our neighborhood. But I wonder if we could get kind of an eyewitness account and a feel with just brief. And I'll ask Mr. Mayor, I know this is out of line, but I think it's kind of appropriate given the circumstances and the fresh wound that this has opened up right away. So I guess I'd ask for leave of council if that was possible.
You're asking for leave of council to allow Mr. Fallon.
Mr. Fallon for a brief
at this time.
Statement. Yes, sir.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councilor Desmarais? All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Fallon, are you prepared to come forward and provide us with a few comments, perhaps limited to about 10 minutes? There's a little red button there. If you could push that, Mr. Fallon, we can all hear you better. Thank you.
Everybody hear me? Thank you, Councilman Ron Bodner, for...
Could we have your name and address for the record, sir?
Yeah, I believe everybody does know my name, but for the record, it's Carrie Fallon.
Address?
2156 Fire Lane 2, Port Colborne, Ontario.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, council members and mayor, for the request that Councilman Ron Bodner made. I'll just start off by 3 years ago, and I'm not going to get into it, I'll cut it really short, but 3 years ago, our community came to council. And I'll just read my notes word by word. And then I'll get to my point. As I stated earlier, this is a very lucrative business with attractiveness to the criminal element. What's stopping someone to get into the Q van, place a UPS sticker on the side, do a snatch and grab, pull away with thousands of dollars in plant material that is easily sold on the streets? What if they endangered the staff with life-threatening injuries while in this process? It's not a nice scenario, is it? But there's always that presence of criminal activity. So the point is, what, a week ago that rolled out, a little bit different. Fortunate enough, like you said, Mr. Mayor, there was quick reaction with a 911 call, and our regional police, I do have to give them credit, 100%. They put every little action they could in place, and it was pretty favorable results. So we're glad to see that. But when you're talking about, and I went on about how much money this greenhouse can make, I even said about 3,000 plants would be grown in this greenhouse. I wasn't too far off. But there's a lot of money to be made. When there's a lot of money to be made and it's fast, that criminal component, it's always there. It's always there. So that was the point I just wanted to make. So kind of moving forward, like Ron said, we are people of Port Colborne, the community on the east side. We're made of business people, tradespeople, teachers, doctors, social workers, healthcare providers. We're a lot of things, but we're not to take for granted. 3 years ago, we came to City Council to stress all our concerns. And we're not pointing fingers because it's kind of 3 years in the past right now. So, but we do love where we are. We don't take this for granted. Where we live is a beautiful place. It's for young families, it's for retirees. We want to be there. We love Port Colborne, and this is why we're here. This is why we fought 3 years ago to be here and to keep it going. So I'd just like to say maybe, and you alluded to it, Mayor, about making a motion to send messages to our Parliament representatives. Councilman, you just talked to our MP Badaway, which is great. Councilman Doucette, sorry. Send the messages to them and send a message to our Health Canada. Health Canada is really the background of all this. And even though that they put stipulations on this, and I could go on and on and on about 24/7 security, perimeter boundaries, the whole gamut, but we have to send a message to Health Canada, because if we don't get this medical marijuana under control, how are we ever going to deal with recreational marijuana when it comes down the pipe? And it's not just our problem. This is a problem within our municipality, the region, Ontario, Canada. These renegades are under licenses that are grandfathered, like Councilman Boner said. They're grandfathered. What's the difference now between these commercial grow of medical marijuana facilities? What's the difference between them? They're in compliance, don't get me wrong. These are up and up facilities that are really running good as far as I know. What's the difference between these facilities that we are on Pinecrest and everywhere else around the region that are growing under these licenses for one or two people, but yet we know they're growing for a lot more? It's a lucrative business, like I just stated. It's out in the streets. Why not make easy money? That's basically what it is. So I think I said enough. I think my time was up. I'm not sure if I have too
Still
much
have 5
more to
minutes
say.
if you had anything more that you wish to say.
I mean, as far as were we scared? Yeah, we were scared, like Ron Berger said. Most neighbors were pretty afraid that day, and went home and just never slept that night too good. So we were fortunate enough that these consequences, or the misfortune that did happen, it was solved fairly quickly and without any casualties or injuries. So, I mean, that's a good point. But the thing is, that was 3 years ago. We should have, we could have, we would have. A lot of people here on council were here. Let's, as Ron Bodner suggested, let's move ahead, move forward. I hate that word, but let's move ahead. And what are we going to do for the next 3 years? Because this isn't our problem. It's Ontario's, it's Canada's. And we got to send that message to our Ministry of Health, right from there up to our Parliament. So
Thank you for your comments. I'll ask if there are any questions from members of the council. If you just hold on 2 seconds. Are there any questions of council? There being none, thank you very much, Mr.
I'll just
Fallon.
thank you for the opportunity to come. Obviously, there's not too much of our time Chris community here, but I'm sure they would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bonner, are you finished?
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, do we need some kind of I'd like a staff report. Do we need consensus from council? Do we have to vote on that? Do we have to, ask the clerk, I guess, or whoever's prepared to answer that?
I think we'll be appropriate to have a motion on that, Mr. Bonner. Do you want to
Sure.
wait till notice the motion section of the agenda, or do you want to come forward right now?
For this particular one, I'd like to move now. Notice a motion, I'll make a different suggestion at that time. So I'd make the motion for staff to look into this and give some thought to it. Has anything changed from 3 years ago? Going forward, how do we deal with this? And can we get information from the police when they're done their investigation to, that may help staff with, I don't know, anything that can be, any pressure that can be put on to make sure that this is not able to reopen, really. Yep.
Clerk, do we have the ask there from Councilor Bodner? Okay. Is there a seconder for that motion as elicited by Councilor Bodner? Councilor Kenny, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councilor Bodner.
Another item?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I'm not sure who to direct this to, but Ron or Dan, I would think. They've been doing bridge repair on the Clarence Street Bridge. And you remember when they did it years ago, they put a sign up at the end of Kalali saying, sorry, bridge repair, bridge closed today. Well, that certainly hasn't been happening. And I just happened to be coming from the reach out center and couldn't go across the bridge, but here's a steady stream of cars coming down and turning around. Somebody actually with a big boat on the back, which they weren't too happy. So all we need is, I don't know whether they would just keep that flashing light going, saying that that bridge is down, but I think we got to be very strong and request them to do it. I believe, Mr. Mayor, that Nancy sent out a request through your office when I emailed, just, sending my request along. I think it should be direction of council. This is crazy. I mean, it's easy. Just put a sign up. They've got the sign someplace anyways. I'll wait for a response.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner. Does anyone care to tackle that one, Mr. Hansel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to Nancy tomorrow. She's been the sort of the pipeline between the Seaway Corporation and the city in terms of the closures and ongoing maintenance. So we'll have that discussion. We've got a fairly good rapport going with the Seaway, and we'll make that request tomorrow.
Thank you.
Of them.
Are there any other councilors' items? Councilor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I forgot to add this one. This is through you to Mr. Hanson. Mr. Hanson, there's quite the bump there again by the petroleum rail just on that Cloudy Street crossing bridge, that concrete bridge. It's getting worse. It was good for a while, but now it's progressively getting worse. So maybe we could shave that down or do something to get rid of that, if that's possible at all. Thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor, Councilor Kenny, we've advised the region, it's a regional road, we've advised them to look forward to doing some repairs at that. The drop is quite severe at that location.
Yeah, it's getting worse. Yeah.
We'll send a reminder to the region tomorrow. They've already been put on notice that we want that repair done, so we'll get on tomorrow.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Any other council items before we move on? Are there any staff responses to previous councilor inquiries? There being none, if We can go back to our council's items requiring separate discussion. I'd like to do with item number 2 first. Councilor Doucette, for the sake of continuity, very quickly, if you wouldn't mind.
Planning and Development Report number 2016-155, subject recommendation report, amendment to development charge bylaw 6131-97-14, 1-year waiving of charges for residential and non-residential development.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councilor May? All those in favor? Oh, I guess we have discussion first. I wonder if we could invite the delegation on this issue to come forward. We have Mr. Lee White, who's the PLW's Planning and Environmental Consultant, and Jeff Andrews, Niagara Peninsula Housing Corporation. Gentlemen, go ahead.
Good evening.
You're speaking as one delegation, so they have roughly 10 minutes to make this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say good evening to Mr. Mayor, councilors, staff, and members of the public. First of all, as mentioned, my name is Jeff Andrews. I am the founder and director of Niagara Peninsula Housing Corp., which is a land development and construction company here in the Niagara region. I'm part of a third generation or 3 generations of property developers and in the construction field, which we about 5 or 6 years ago came to the Niagara region, thus the name Niagara Peninsula Housing Corp. So tonight I'd like to speak very briefly on the matter of the waiving of development fees. And first of all, applaud council for the last 2 years on which they obviously saw the benefits. And I think during the report or the council meeting that was held on September 12th, that many of those successes were discussed. And I'd like to say that I echo the words of Mr. Aquilina and Mr. Cheshire, who spoke to council and addressed the benefits and the results that came from those waiving of development fees, as well as echo the words of Councillor Kenny when she asked Mr. Aquilina what were the benefits and what would be the remunerations in terms of offsets with property tax. And once answered, her comments were, this was a good return on investment and I am in favor of ways to generate new growth. As a property developer, not just single small homes, but larger developments, it takes a lot of investment money and a lot of backing and support from outside support groups. And the only way that I've been able to personally garner the support of GTA investors and financial institutions is to be able to show them the benefits and the waiving of development fees, and therefore offsetting some of the expenditures, because the payback in smaller communities is not that of what you would see in the big metropolises. So we feel very strongly that the future developments that we have actually in the pipeline already, and in the PowerPoint presentation, Mr. White will show you some of the ones that are up and coming, that the viability and the success of them is contingent on the waiving of development fees in order to make the business make money. We know that for decades and decades and decades, the term was growth pays for growth. We feel as though growth spurs on more growth. So it's maybe a little bit of a difference in wording, but we're here to grow with the community. And as I said, we have a number of projects that are in the pipeline, one of which we were hoping was a little bit farther ahead to mention tonight, but there's one that I'm sure council members are very familiar with on West Side that has been before council for 7 or 8 years, that we are in negotiations with to be able to develop that site as well to an amicable development status to the community and council. So I would like to turn it over now to Mr. White as he does a short PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Out of respect for your time, I'll go through this relatively quickly, and you'll have a copy of it to refer to afterwards. Basically, who is Niagara Peninsula Housing Corp? Jeff Andrews, who's the founder. It's a local business who has partnered with some investment firms from the GTA to help bring their money in to help build some of these projects. Three-generation family business. His father and children are also in the business. You mentioned some of the GTA companies, investment groups that are coming in here. Never would have thought of coming to Port Colborne absent a local representative showing them the initiative and the potential return on investment, of which the waiver of development charges, the upfront dollars are the hardest ones to get, but if that can provide or be minimized up front, it certainly provides a greater level of interest on behalf of the investors. So Concord Pacific and Kana Holdings are two of the people who are investing and part of Niagara Peninsula Housing Corp. Some of the other projects that they've worked together on, we've got one in Oshawa. It is a student residence with 60 student beds, 4-story apartment building, successfully developed and just recently completed for this year for students of University of Ontario Institute of Technology and Durham College. Just run through some pictures. Definitely a high-end, good-looking development. As a student residence, common areas, full kitchens, and bedrooms with individual washrooms, locking doors, very well conceived and well developed. Another project that you'll be familiar with in Port Colborne is 206 to 220 Erie Street, 8-unit block townhouse, recently developed and approved, and about just shy of $1 million in investment in Port Colborne. Here's some of the construction photos at the time and just wrapping up some of the landscaping. So it's come to fruition, fully occupied. And again, when faced with a potential OMB hearing at that time, being the good local representatives, had a settlement hearing and came to agreements with the neighbors and did some additional landscaping, went, in my opinion as a planner, above and beyond what would normally be required, and it helped to work things out. And here's some pictures of it just as construction was wrapping up and completed. This is some of the interior shots of those units. Been inside, very nice. And estimating that the annual taxes from that one building alone about $10,000. So you're going to get that from here on out. Will help to repay what is being the deferral, but it's there now. Formerly not paying taxes as a part of a city park. Another one that's recently been done, a conversion of an elementary school in Fort Erie. $11 million investment in the town of Fort Erie. Started off with the first phase, 13 residential units being done within the existing building. This will be a little difficult to see, but it's got the existing school and then 6 small apartment buildings, so about 8 units each, which are being built around there as well. Subsequently had a private Chinese school come and occupy the entire elementary school, so they'll be operating out of the ground level with the residential on the second level, but recently had working through a severance with the town of Fort Erie, was just approved last week, that will be severing off that parcel to the south on the other frontage to develop those 48 residential units, or however many it works out to. So as I mentioned, $11 million investment. Again, a former school not paying taxes is now $11 million worth of residential development in that town. Current projects that we submitted for and were at the stage of having approvals, and basically went back and did a bit of a redesign to make it a little more lower scale. It was one large 24-unit apartment building at the rear of the property. The redesign is taking it to, again, this is hard to see, but 2 12-unit apartment buildings along the side. So it's got a little better frontage, closer to the street, a little more curb appeal than would have originally been the case had the whole building been in the back. This is a schematic of the potential, each of those 2 buildings. And that one was about another $2.7 million worth of taxable income coming from a former brownfield. Future projects, Mr. Andrews made reference to the property on West Side Road. Currently has an offer to purchase. A preliminary concept is 6 to 8 high-end individual custom homes adjacent to the single-family residences, and then with 18 to 22 custom townhomes, which would be on West Side Road. So decreasing in density as you get closer to the existing residential. I figured the total estimated residential value of that $10.2 million, and that again being spurred on by some of these same developers who wouldn't otherwise be investing in the city of Port Colborne absent the deferral of the development charges. This is where the parcel is, currently vacant. Probability is pretty unlikely. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but this is a great opportunity to make it happen now. And that's the end of the presentation. Certainly appreciate your consideration of this matter in helping to spur growth in this municipality.
Thank you, Mr. White. Are there any questions of council? Mr. Rodner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. So you know we've got this on for an additional year, right? So, you know, we pushed it to another year. Whether we go further than that will be certainly a decision of council at the time. But, you know, I appreciate everything you've done. That's wonderful. And your interest in the community is great. And, you know, I've been here since '98, B also, and, you know, probably before that maybe, Yvonne. We've seen the same developers come back and ask for extensions on their subdivisions on a regular basis. So if there's any way you can get a hold of any of these properties and move ahead, that would be great. But I will just say again, we've bumped this for another year, so hopefully your developments can come on board, you know, before that, and we'd be certainly anxious to help you any way we can. Thank you.
Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when, guys, are we going to see the development on Minto? This year? On Minto Street? When will we see that?
As soon as I can grab the engineering drawings out of the engineer's hands, we're actually overdue. We were
I thought so, yeah, I thought so
construction
too.
this fall.
Okay. So we're going to see a building people working in the winter in that area?
Our intention, Councillor Kenny, is to break ground this year with the support of planning. We have a little bit of work to do there, and then the engineering designs, as Mr. White has alluded to. Not 1 minute later than the soonest possible time.
Okay, perfect. Because it was freezing cold the last day when Frank and I went over and put the shovel in the ground for that Erie Street. It was so cold that day.
March 16th.
Okay, all right.
March 16th. I flew in the night before.
Yeah.
Came from the airport for the shoveling ground.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Councilor Danch?
And through you to Jeff, I know, Jeff, we talked there a couple of years back when you got going on Erie and that, and I live close by, and I can say your property's been well maintained. You don't see anything discreditable going on that property. I know your rents are there, and they should be, and you've done a nice job, and looking forward to seeing that lot on Minto get filled with something else as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We're all finished as far as questions go. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your presentation.
Mr. Mayor, could I just make one more comment?
Certainly.
Just in terms of of floor 2, the planning department, we've had tremendous support through all staff there, and with some of these other projects that we are trying to get into the pipeline, which the 1-year moratorium is going to be tight for us for sure. We're in discussions with Mr. Aquilina on Wednesday to be able to see how we can make some of those projects move forward. As I said, some of them that have been before council for 7 or 8 years and been before the OMB for many times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe this time we require a vote on the recommendation of Mr. Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next is item number 1. Mr. Main, I'll allow you to go first this time, and the next item will be Mrs. Demery.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion regarding the Niagara Tourism Information Center kiosk at the Grimsby Gateway Center. Now, this first part of this motion was brought to the region. And the second half is from the municipalities that are involved. I would say that I was told that most municipalities have already passed this, with the exception of us. We were the last people. And I'll read through it for those who haven't read it. Whereas Niagara Regional Policy Plan, Chapter 2, Growing the Economy, states the region has a role in tourism. Whereas Section 2A, Tourism, supports the Wine Route, 20 Valley, the Greater Niagara Circle Route, the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail, and the Trans-Canada Trail. And whereas in the Niagara Regional Council passed a motion at its regular meeting on April the 28th, 2016, referring to staff the issue of closing the Tourism Information Center and or developing a new operation plan that states as follows: that staff be authorized to terminate lease agreements with the Tin Wind Partnership at the Grimsby Gateway Center to close at the end of the third quarter, subject to a staff report to Council outlining a review. That the review consider feedback from the Tourism Summit. That the report outline a new operation plan seeking financial support from the Ontario Ministry of Tourism and the Tourism Partnership of Niagara. That a new lease agreement be negotiated with the landlord, and that staff be directed to develop a new operation plan for the Gateway Center. Now, therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne resolves as follows. 1, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne supports, in principle, the concept of a Niagara Tourism Information Center at the existing Casablanca site. That Council supports, in principle, that Niagara Region develop a new operation plan and a new lease agreement to support a Niagara Tourism Information Kiosk at the Grimsby Gateway Center. That Council supports the direction of the Niagara Region development of regional tourism strategy around the 5 Trail Scenic Drive tourism strategy that will assist in bringing visitors to the 12 municipalities: Niagara South Coast Drive, Trans-Canada Drive, Trail, Welland Canal, Parkway, Greater Niagara Circle Route, the Niagara River Parkway, the Wine Route, and the Lake Ontario Waterfront Trail Drive. Number 4, that Council supports staff participation in a regional tourism summit. And number 5, which is my favorite, that Council requests the Niagara Region to provide financial support to all municipal visitor information centers in a similar manner in which it supports the Niagara Tourism Information Center kiosk at the Grimsby Gateway Center.
Thank you, Mr. May. Any discussion on this? You had seconded. You wish to discuss? Go ahead.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I had requested a comment from our staff, from Evan Ox, earlier today. He did send an email with his comments, and I would like to ask Dan Aquilina if he would like to present staff's comments on this report.
Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais. I'm not sure if does council want me to read the email verbatim or just kind of summarize the comments that came from Mr. Och?
I think we summarize the comments.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Appropriate.
Basically, what Mr. Och is saying is that there should be an overall tourism strategy across the entire region that actually looks at other municipalities, what they're doing for tourism. South Coast Tourism Association as well, and not take light the fact that other regions, other parts of the region are into the tourism business. So there should be a holistic approach to tourism across the region as a whole. Before that is done, there should be no direction towards giving monies or supporting something in the north of the region until that strategy is complete. It's essentially what the comments were.
Councilor Desmarais.
Thank you very much. I think it's really important that we all heard that, because voting in favor of the motion would certainly we would have an impact there. And the other thing I would like to do is hear from Councillor Bodner with respect to Niagara South Tourism and how any comments they may have.
Councillor Bodner, are you in a position to comment?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councillor, for the opportunity. Certainly, tourism is a big deal. A lot of our businesses in Port Colborne rely heavily on, on the tourist season to get them through the winter time. Anything we can do to stimulate people stopping in our area is a good thing. I do think that Mr. Hodge has hit the nail on the head pretty well, that there has to be a comprehensive approach to that tourism, the tourism strategy. And I know that the region is working with, and you'll see in the first part of the motion, on number 1, partway down it asks for that the report outline a new operation plan seeking financial support from the Ontario Ministry of Tourism and the Tourism Partnership of Niagara. Tourism Partnership of Niagara, I also sit on that board, and I know that they're not prepared to financially support this. That's not part of our mandate. So I think that point, although they could ask, may not go too far. But I agree there has to be a comprehensive strategy on tourism. I like Councillor Main's point that he slipped in at the bottom. I think that's, not an unreasonable ask. And, I fully support anything that can help tourism. And if this goes forward, it's been asked to re-look at this whole situation. So I think that's an important part of it also, how they're going to structure this if it does go ahead. So that's about all I got.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Being done, call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? 1 opposed? 2 opposed. Carried. Item number 4. Ask Councillor Desmarais to move on this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fire Emergency Services, report number 2016-154, subject Fire Underwriter Survey.
Seconder for the recommendation, Councillor Kenny. Speakers for and against. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have made myself fully aware of this situation, and I will be supporting the motion, but I would like to ask our fire chief for some comments on this motion and for some particular bits of information, such as a very brief outline of the reasons that this should be happening and the possible locations and what would determine those.
Through your worship to council, the report speaks to a lot of those issues that you've pointed out. I'll try to be as brief as possible with regards to it. The report emanates out of the Underwriter Survey report that was completed earlier this year. I will say that this has not been the first time that we've discussed this issue, or councils in the past have. When we designed the new fire station, it was a recommendation that by myself in that particular report, that we retain the architect who did that to design a smaller station for the rural area for future development. It was raised again when we met in strategic planning at the Rathlawn Inn, and again at Roselawn at strategic planning, and then last year strategic planning. The fire underwriters survey, and it's pretty detailed. They spent at least 3 full days. On top of that, they reviewed the municipality's water supply in depth with the cooperation of Ron and his staff, provided them with a significant amount of information with regards to water flows and various other issues with regards to water main sizes and things of that nature. Out of that, they determined that we're underprotected in a large portion of the community. I provided council, I believe, a copy of that report as well as mapping that indicated clearly where our weak spots are. Basically, there's two different ways of looking at it. One is that we don't have a proper fire hall, and secondly, we don't provide municipal water supply. If you look at the mapping that was provided to you on behalf of the insurance underwriters and myself, there's two different areas. The yellowish area, the beige area, is the area that would require a water supply, and then the red area is an area that has neither one of them, neither water supply or firefighting abilities. They use a determination that it's based on distance from a fire station to those areas that are protected and or water supply for those areas that don't have water supply. In our case, if it's more than 8 kilometers, they don't get the reduced rates of insurance. And in my report, I showed you a chart that clearly outlines the cost of insurance and the difference. One if you provide water supply, or one a fire station, and the second one is a further reduction for water supply. So it's a significant amount of savings for the taxpayers. I do want to say, and my report speaks to it on several occasions, the insurance underwriters have no mechanism by which they can force the municipal council to provide fire protection. That's a determination that council has to make. It's my job as the fire chief to bring forward what I feel would best protect the community, and I've tried to do that and outlined that within the report. Council makes that decision. The level of service is provided by council. Council can change the level of service, good or bad, at any point in time they choose to do so. It's my job to convey to you people as best as possible my professional opinion with regards to what's best for the community as a whole. And I've tried to do that within the report, thus the recommendation that was made. I'm not really sure what other points you may have interest in. I don't know if that covers all of your points, but if there's other questions, by all means.
Councilor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, through you to the Chief. Chief, if possible, you could speak to possible locations for another fire hall and the reasons for those locations. And I'm asking this because Council did receive a few emails from members of the community with suggestions for locations that I know in conversation with you previously we were ruling those out for various reasons. So if you could speak to possible locations, that would be great.
Through your worship, I want to be somewhat cautious because there may be some land speculation. So I need to be somewhat cautious. Obviously, that determination has been made up to this point in time. I would try to hope that we could pick a point that would best protect a largest majority of the community. It also has to take into consideration availability of people that live in that area, because I anticipate manning this or putting personnel in there that would be volunteer, not full-time at this particular time, depending on the development obviously down the road. So obviously we'd be looking to put it in a location that would best suit the municipality's purposes. In a quick overview of it, there is no single location that will protect the entire area that's vacant of a fire station at this time. But there is some locations that would cover probably 99.5% of the community. The other thing I will, if I could just talk a little bit about it, and it takes a couple minutes to try to explain it if I can, Your Worship, to Council. There's a position the underwriters serve, and I happen to bring that document with me tonight, or portions of it, which is under review currently. It's called a water shuttle, and basically for the areas that don't have a municipal water supply but do have a fire hall, or those areas that have neither, there's a process in place that a test can be conducted to flow water at, I believe it's 165 gallons a minute for 3 hours. It's laid out pretty specifically as to 265 gallons a minute, sorry, for 3 hours. And you have to draw that water supply from a draft, and you have to be able to water shuttle it through tankers. Now, they used to allow you 5 minutes in setup time. They've decreased that to 5 minutes, or 2 minutes, because they were finding that more municipalities were able to meet the requirements, thus reducing insurance rate, which affects the money the insurance companies make. So there's a big wheel that goes around and around and around, and obviously money keeps it going. So we're handicapped in some areas, but quite frankly, with the addition of a tanker and help with other tankers. Welland's in the process of getting a tanker. We have 2 directly adjacent to us in Fort Erie and plus Wainfleet. We can probably fulfill the requirements of that with some hard work and testing to be able to meet the requirements. So there's an opportunity to have a significant impact in the community, to say nothing of the added fire protection that would be provided to the entire community.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Mr. Maine? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chief Cartwright. What I don't agree with how we run council is I get this package on a Thursday night. I have to read it, I have to digest it, and then Monday I have to make a decision. I don't think that's enough time for me. I have some questions. One, apparatus and equipment, your estimate was $300,000. I thought we bought a pumper tanker. Would you not put the pumper tanker out in the rural area? I mean, that's already paid for, or going to be paid for in 5 years or whatever. Volunteers, estimate 15 at $150,000. Well, last year's budget, we decided to take 8 on for $40,000. I have to have a little bit more information, and I'm not saying that we don't need a fire hall out there, but what I can't get my head around is it's not the fire hall that saves houses, it's the people in them. So that has to be maintained. Like, I could put up a sign that says this is a fire hall, and the underwriter drives by and says, oh yeah, you got an old truck sitting there, that's fire hall. It's the people in the fire hall that cut down the time it takes you to get the truck to the area. Now, if we build a hall out in the country, and if it's not maintained or serviced 24/7, we might as well just put up a garage. So I can't support it on 4 days of sinking in. I have to have some more answers, a little bit more detail. And I know these are just estimates and to make this up, but if I'm going to be voting on something that's going to cost, their estimate's 1.6, and it's probably going to be more like 2. I have to have a little bit more time and a little bit more information. And I would really appreciate that as a councillor. So thank you very much for that, if you can answer those questions. Councillor Kennedy, then Councillor Doucette. Councillor Wagner. Go ahead, Councillor Kennedy.
If I could, Your Worship,
I'm sorry.
Councillor Maine did ask a couple of questions. I think he'd like an answer to some of those questions. Sure. Your Worship, to Councillor Maine, yes, I had mentioned that in strategic planning, the tanker from the city could go to the rural area. The downside of that is by adding a second apparatus in that particular location, there is a requirement under the underwriters. You got to have at least 1,500 gallons of water on board. You got to be able to service it with at least 15 people minimum assigned to that station, and you've also got to be able to pump 1,050 gallons a minute. So there are some, and our new tanker does do all of those things. It has 3,000 gallons of water. I thought by being able to add a second tank truck, a smaller tanker, a smaller version, 1,500 gallons, it would allow us to do the water shuttle, which would have a positive impact throughout the community as a whole, not just the particular area out there, but the entire community would benefit from that. It also provides us with another apparatus, but that's not to say that that number couldn't be revisited down the road. Quite frankly, if council chose to say you got to put the new tanker out there, by all means, that's what we would do. That's council's decision in the future. As far as the additional cost, you need to remember that we're not just putting bunker gear and helmets on the guys. We got to put clothing on the guys. The money that I'm putting into and uniforms, the monies that I'm putting into the new people that we're about to bring on or start bringing on the process, the money that we would cover the clothing, the additional clothing and so on would come out of an existing budget that we currently have. Added to that, it's 3 to 4 years down the road. I suspect there will be a substantial increase in cost. Bunker gear is going up substantially over the next couple of years. In fact, if the new design comes out, which may be mandated, we're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 for a set of bunker gear. That's in the works. Whether or not it'll get here in 2019 when we need that type of equipment to give those individuals that might be working out of that stations. I hope that answers some of your questions. As far as timing goes, that's a decision of council to make.
Thank you, Chief. If you may, I just have a follow-up quickly. I still need an answer about who maintains for 24/7. If you have a volunteer that lives the next concession, he still has to get in his vehicle. He still has to respond to the station. How does that cut down on response time?
I'm having a hard time getting my head around that part. The only way these people, as far as I'm concerned, are going to get adequate protection is if they have 24/7. And I don't know at $90,000 a year for a first-class firefighter how we're going to do it. I mean, I have to have a little bit more answers, a little bit more detail than this, and I hope we can come up with that in the next couple of weeks.
Your Worship, if I can, if you recall in strategic planning, I did make mention of the fact that some fire services in Western Canada that host the volunteers or have volunteers, they provide a common meeting room, a common a bunk room, and a common room for kitchen facilities and living room facilities, and volunteer firefighters who might be inclined to do so could actually stay within the fire hall to give you that added protection. Additionally, when we had 3 people on duty, which about 45% of the time we have 3 people working, there is an opportunity to put a person out there in that station from time to time to try to cover some of those needs as they may arise in the future. And obviously, if we weren't able to cover it with volunteers, I'd obviously be coming back to council and requesting the fact we'd have to up staffing.
Finish, Councilor Bean. Move on to Councilor Doucette then. Councilor Kennedy, I don't know why I'm calling.
That's okay. I think the speaker did too. But anyway, that's okay. My concerns, Chief, are the same. I totally respect the report that you put in front of us, but I have concerns that in staffing and how much extra money that's going to cost in addition. And like Councilor Main, if it's just the water that we have to have out there, well then maybe we should just build a garage and put the tanker in there. It's just, there's some things I really want to hear from the rest of councillors, but I really need a little bit more time to look at this too. I appreciated the report that he gave us last week, that this discussion was coming up, but I just need a little bit more time to get my head around it, and I'm going to try to make time to go to the chief's department and talk to him, because I'm concerned about that. I mean, it looks great. You say you get the land, you get the fire station, and all this equipment, then you got to get volunteers. Then you know, it's just way too much for our small community. And so I want a little bit more information before I make a decision. Thank you.
Councilor Doucette, the real Councilor Doucette.
The real one, yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Chief, maybe I'm going to be nostalgic a bit here. I remember way back when we studied, I believe it was before we put the new station that you're in presently in, there was a study done by the fire college or something like that, that indicated where the best place to put a station out there. If I remember right, and I might be wrong, it was in the middle of nowhere. And we decided not to because we could not see how this would benefit the community in some way, shape, or form. Am I wrong in that assessment, or do you remember back? Or I believe you were the one that was here as a chief when that was done. Am I wrong? Through you, sir, to the fire chief.
Chief, do you have a comment?
Your Worship, to council, I don't believe I was there for that survey because the Fire Marshal's Office continued that assistance. They used to assist in doing that. They no longer do it, and they have stopped doing it for a number of years.
Okay.
The job of spotting the new fire station that we currently are in was left to myself and Mike Bandia and others within the organization, and also council of the day. Part of the reason why the one bridge was built across the weir to assist us in that type of decision making, and it certainly has made a significant difference. I do know for a fact that prior to me being here, there was a discussion about relocating a rural station, and you're not wrong in the sense that we've quite frankly, we've looked at the ideal place out there. To put it where the ideal situation or the ideal place would be, you're not far off in saying that it's kind of out of the way. So obviously, as I alluded to earlier, we'd have to take all those types of things into consideration. If we put it to where we believe it could go, or in an area in which it could go, we would probably have access to people that could possibly be recruited to be volunteer firefighters. But as I had said earlier, again, that would leave a small area of the community to our far southeast, if I can say that. I guess, or north, I guess it would be. Yeah. You need to understand that there's a possibility that that particular area could continue to be covered by a station, one station out of Fort Erie, and that would be out of Stevensville, which could provide that protection for that particular area, which would fall within the 8 kilometers of that as far as the insurance underwriters are concerned. So there are other things that could work hand in hand, but quite frankly, we haven't spotted what the best place would be at this particular time, because I need some direction from council as to where they want to go with this. And I understand the comments made by Councillor Kenny and so on about concerns. Trust me, this decision on my part was not taken easily. I understand the financial constraints. I understand the other issues that come to light. I understand that there's trying to manage additional personnel, maintain personnel, all of those types of things. But I have to, in my view, I have to bring to council my position with regards to the best protection that would be available to the community in as timely a fashion as possible at the most cost-effective way to do that. And we haven't really started that process with regards to what is the most cost-effective way. If council were to determine that we're going to live with what we have, so be it. That's a council decision. That's a political decision, not the fire chief's decision.
Mm-hmm. One more comment and question, and maybe some people will say I'm out of line, but I think it needs to be said. I have a concern with someone writing a report to try to suggest to us that we do something that will probably, and I'm going to say it this way, probably save them money. And I'm looking at the insurance companies. Okay? I don't mean that they're going to stray us too far. What I'm talking about is if someone is going to give me a suggestion that we need to spend a lot of money to put something that's going to save them money, then I believe that that group has a form of conflict. And I believe this report, and if I'm wrong, I'd like someone to correct me, but I see this report as important for us to take a good look at, but I think we need to move very cautiously because of the other side of what I just said. And I think that's important as well. So I'm sort of concerned because we're going to spend all this money, but who are we really saving? I mean, they're trying to tell us that the citizens are going to save a lot of money. I don't believe they're going to save as much money as we think, but we probably will save the insurance companies a hell of a lot of money. And that's where I'm coming from. So we have to be cautious. Should we do something to help our citizens? Yes. But let's make sure it really will help our citizens as much as possible. And that's what's critical to me and important to me. So I don't know if the chief wants to comment on that, but I don't even know if it's worth commenting on. But I mean, if you want to, go for it, chief.
Your worship, to Councillor Doucette, I don't disagree with what you had to say. And quite frankly, the insurance companies, there is going to be a cost saving as the report speaks to with regards to, and that information was gleaned out of the insurance industry, not my imagination. That information was provided by the insurance industry. That's not to say that by the time the station were to open, those rates aren't going to be where they are today, or would they be even higher than what we're looking at in the chart that I've provided to council. I don't disagree with the fact that you're right in the sense that either way, they're going to have a savings. They're either, for what they lose, they're going to gain in less loss. That's the whole preface in which they work. So whether or not that will turn out to be a dollar saving for the ratepayers out there, it's not for me to say at this particular time. I would hope that the numbers that I've shown council are significant. If we can do both, another station and water shuttle, for example, it's significant. It impacts a much larger area if we can provide both those services to that particular area or into the larger area. But again, I don't disagree with your comments at all with regards to insurer.
Councillor Reiner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't think this is about saving money on insurance. I talked to my insurance agent, and it really wasn't a great deal of money savings as far as I know the chief's got some figures, but I think mine was $150. I think it goes to Lorraine Road is one charge. From Lorraine Road to gas line is a greater charge, and then from there on it's another charge. So for some people it might be significant, and maybe different insurance companies have different rates for that. I'm not really sure. But I really think it is about the protection factor of, of people that live out there. Certainly an intelligent councillor that sits to my right said that, he doubts whether somebody moved toward 4, and the big consideration was how much fire insurance they're going to pay. They move there for, because they like the area and whatever. And maybe they didn't even think about the fire protection. I don't know. Certainly, that's up to them. But, I think we owe it to the residents to take a really darn good look at this. Whether it turns out to be exactly this or some form of this. And I don't know how, and I guess I'll leave it to the chief. There's certainly a recommendation in there, but I've heard from councillors that they want more time to think about it. Is there some things that we can move ahead on while they're thinking that wouldn't cost us a lot of money? Like trying to zero in on the correct location, There's talk, Chief, of automatic aid agreement with Fort Erie. Now, is that something I thought we had something like that already established, and I'd like to hear from you whether that's something we need to move ahead on no matter what happens, or is that only going to happen if we do a new fire station?
Chief. Your Worship, and Councillor Bodner. No, obviously there's things that we can move ahead with to investigate, that being trying to find a site that would be most ideal to protect the entire community, and or a secondary location that might best suit our purposes. The other thing we can do with Council's authorization, I can certainly enter in discussions with the town of Fort Erie Fire Chief to see if they'd even have interest in providing automatic aid. We could do that as an interim. We could do that as and again, we try to flush out what those costs might be, because a lot of those contracts or those agreements come with a cost. We have what we currently call mutual aid agreement, significantly different than automatic aid. Automatic aid, that department that would enter into that agreement would automatically be dispatched to that particular area they're assigned to, whereas mutual aid, we'd have to get there and ask for their assistance and or call for it on the way to a call. That's the biggest difference. It's reciprocal, so in other words, whatever we use from them, as long as we can give it back to them as a service level, there's no fee back to us through mutual aid. Through automatic aid, there could be. That's not to say they would. So to answer your question fully, yes, we could look at sites, and yes, we could, with Council's authorization, to enter into discussions. If in the event Council chose not to, and I believe I talked about some of that within the other options, we could enter into that those types of automatic aid agreements with the town of Fort Erie, and not build a new fire station, and that would protect our community at its furthest outreach, which is probably at the biggest potential hazard to us. But unfortunately, because of the location of the fire stations in Fort Erie, you're looking at roughly Pleasant Beach Road. It would hit the 8-kilometer radius from the lake and out further to the, I guess it's actually the north. So it would be very, very limited what they can do. As an interim measure, we've increased our fire prevention efforts out in the rural area. We have an ongoing door-to-door program with the volunteers. They're going out Tuesdays and Thursdays with the truck, the pickup truck, and they're going door-to-door talking about fire safety and providing them with information with regards to smoke alarms and evacuation procedures and things of that nature. We don't get into a lot of places because a lot of people aren't home, but we do leave that information with them. And we have a map, we have a scale as to where we're going and those types of things that we're dealing with, trying to track all of that. So we're trying to be more progressive with regards to that type of information, now using our volunteer force where possible, whenever they're available. So we're trying to be a little more proactive, and obviously we try to constantly talk about fire prevention, public education on a regular basis, and we spend a substantial amount of money every year doing that. And we have had a positive impact now that we have a fire prevention officer, because he's able to oversee that program far more closely than what we were able to do in the past.
Mr. Bodner?
So just reading the comments from council, I have a feeling this may be put off for further discussion, but if that does happen, I wonder if council would consider moving ahead on the things that would not cost us money, investigating certain things that would, whether it is the automatic aid or whatever the chief thinks could enhance protection in that area, while we make a decision on this. It's serious stuff if it leads to certainly some disaster that could happen. But I'll wait to see how council goes on that. Thanks.
You're finished, Councillor Bodner. Any other questions? Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to further on Councillor Bodner's comments. This is not about insurance for me either. I really don't think insurance plays into this in a big way. Being dictated to by the insurance industry is never fun, but let's face it, we do it daily in every form of our life. But in this case, for me, it's about providing a level of service that's equal to the rest of the city for the residents of Ward 4. It's about protecting life and protecting property, getting those response times down. That's what it's about, plain and simple safety. And if we're not ready to provide that to our residents, then that's not a good thing. So that's what it's about for me. Thank you.
Dave?
Your Worship, if I could, I'd just like to go back to Councillor Bodner, but thank you for your comments. The automatic aid agreement, I tried to talk about it in the report. I did talk about it. Fort Erie may very well not be interested, simply because they're an all-volunteer force, and when they're coming into our municipality, it takes away from the protection of their community. Let's be honest, we all have struggles with volunteer forces, trying to get enough people out and those types of things, thus full-time firefighters. And certainly they're no different than us or anybody else. And they may not be interested. That's not to be taken negatively by our community if, in fact, that's the direction they come back with. But quite frankly, I have not had any discussion other than one occasion several months ago with the chief down there. And to get more in depth, I really need some direction from council before I'd even consider talking about it. And I don't want to give up false hope to anybody in that particular. They could reject it because it would take away from their resources in their community.
Councillor Demery, finished? All speakers are finished. I've heard some comment here this evening about deferral of this item. If someone wishes to do so, perhaps you'd make a motion, we could decide that, and then move on from there. So, Councillor Main, do you wish to make the motion? And seconded by Councillor Kitty? Yes. We have the motion of deferral to a specific date. What is the date that you choose? Madam Clerk, could you assist us with a date that's could be a council meeting?
Mr. Mayor, for some information that they're asking the chief to provide, as that may impact timing.
No, the reason for the deferral is you do not want additional information. You would just like to consider this issue a little more thoroughly before, based on the material that's in the report. Councillor Kenny.
Correct, but I would entertain what Councillor Bodner said, that while we're digesting this, if we can give the chief direction to check with Fort Erie, because I do understand as well, I think Waynfield is building a new fire hall too.
Well,
so I mean, there's a fire hall close as well. So anyways, I would entertain what Councillor Bodner said, that we check with Fort Erie for that agreement and entertain a location so that information can be brought back to me before I make a decision. That's what I'd like to see. Thank you.
Chief, how long would it take to get additional information as requested by Mr. Bodner and Councillor Kenny? Yes, Councillor Doucette.
A deferral motion is non-discussable, and we're discussing something that we shouldn't be discussing. We either vote on it, yes, no, and that's it. If I'm wrong, Madam Clerk can correct me on that, but I believe that there's no discussion once the motion has been put on the floor, and it has been put on the floor.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A discussion is permitted on a motion for deferral concerning timing and the nature of the deferral.
So timing we're still dealing with. We're looking for some direction, Chief, on how much time we would require to obtain additional information suggested by Mr. Bodner.
Your Worship, I would suggest I could probably make some significant headway with regards to their interest within the next month, 4 weeks.
So
I could do a brief report back to council for the last meeting of October, if with any luck.
Last meeting in October, agreeable to you, Mr. Maine? Go ahead.
I made the motion, so I so moved. The last thing in October would be fine with me.
That last meeting in October, Councillor Kenny agrees with that?
I do. Can you just have clarity about whether there's direction to the chief on the directors? I have a draft motion, if I could permit me to read it.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a draft motion that I created while members of council were discussing and debating the issue. I'll read it out, and if there's any changes required, please let me know. The consideration of the matter of designing and building and equipping a new fire station be deferred, and I will add until the last meeting in October, that the fire chief be directed to investigate and prepare a report outlining potential locations of a new fire station, and that the fire chief be directed to investigate and prepare a report and regarding entering into an automatic aid agreement with the town of Fort Erie.
That covers everything? Mr. Maine, that covers all your concerns?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you please put in the operation? Who's going to man it? How many hours? I know it's just a wish list on my part, and it's probably something that the chief can't answer right away because this hasn't been built yet. But I'd like everybody to keep that in mind, that is this going to be a rural fire department, or is it going to be an annex, or how it's going to work? So if you could include that in the report, I'd be quite happy with that.
Okay. Everyone is clear on the motion for deferral? All those in favor? Carried unanimously? Everybody. Okay, that completes our discussion of councilors' items and our consideration of items requiring a separate discussion. Notice of motion, Mr. Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll bring a motion forward at the next meeting, and the gist of the motion will be that that we contact the different agencies that could be in charge of enforcing something on these grandfathered in greenhouses that grow for people that have a prescription. So that's kind of the gist of it. And, you know, I know this is a problem also in Niagara-on-the-Lake. So I think if we, you know, we do circulate this, we might get some support on it. And somebody's got to be in charge. So.
We will look forward to your motion at the next meeting. At this point, I would entertain a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Main, second by Councillor Demery. All those in favor? Carried. Meeting is adjourned. Move on to the regular meeting. Call to order. Regular meeting of Council 28-16, Monday, September 26th. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. None this evening.
I'd entertain a motion for confirming the agenda. Moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Bodner. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? There being none, that will be so noted. Thank you. I would like to call for the motion of adoption of minutes. The special meeting of Council 25-16 held on September 12th, 2016. Special meeting of Council 26-16 held on September 12th, 2016. And C, the regular meeting of Council 27-16 held on September 12th, 2016. Could I have a motion that we adopt those minutes? Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Can I see your hands, please? Carried. Determination of items requiring a separate discussion. Are there any? There being none, I'd call for a approval of items, a motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor May. All those in favor? Carried. Proclamations, Madam Clerk. So we have two proclamations. One is the Waste Reduction Week, October 17th to 23rd, 2016. The other one is Fire Prevention Week, October 9th to October 15th, 2016. Do we have a seconder, a mover, and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Danch, seconded by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Carried. We have minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of July 12th, 2016. The minutes of the Port Colborne Medical Education Recruitment and Health Services Committee meeting of May 16th, 2016. I have a mover and a seconder to accept those minutes. Moved by Councillor Demery, seconded by Councillor Main. All those in favor? Carried. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be enacted and passed. Bylaw 6405-8516, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 613-19714, being a bylaw to impose development charges for the city of Port Colborne, and bylaw 6406-8615, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the city of Port Colborne at its meeting of September 26, 2016.
You've heard the bylaws listed. All those in favor? Oh, moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor again? It's carried. Thank you. At this time, I request a motion to propose. I'm going to propose to go into closed session. That council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters: Chief Administrative Office Report 2016-159 regarding a human resources matter pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239(2)B. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and subsection 2D, labor relations or employee negotiations. And the second item is Planning and Development, Economic Development Division, Report 2016-160, concerning the potential disposition of city-owned land pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239(2)C, a proposed or pending acquisition of land by the municipality or local board. Could someone move that motion? Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Danch. All those in favor? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move into closed session.